Hello, welcome to the Mindmeld Live with Shell Protocol. I'm Cairo. Here with us we have Kenny, our founder, and
What's up, guys?
Viraz, one of our developers. I guess I just stole your introductions, but do you want to add on anything about yourselves really quickly, guys? Viraz, you first.
Yeah, hi guys. Hi again. I'm working on building the protocol side of things at Shell, and nice to be here again.
Right. Kenny?
Hey, what's up? I'm Kenny. Those of you who've watched the podcast before probably are beginning to recognize my face. I'm the founder and chief economist of Shell Protocol, and it's always a pleasure and a privilege to be here talking to you guys virtually.
So, as always, guys, if you're watching live, please come to our Mindmeld chat channel in our Discord. That is where we're following along with questions. If you're watching a recording, please consider joining live at some point in the future if it works for your time zone, because it would be fun to have you on hear your questions. You may notice we do not have a guest currently. Our planned guest, Andy from
I have
Forta
a guest.
Network, is currently, I believe, in Bulgaria and suffering from some spotty Wi-Fi. So if you stayed up just to see him, then I guess this is the first and hopefully only Shell Protocol rug pull because he's not here. Sorry, but he may join. So we're just gonna start with some Shell stuff, and if he's able to get his connection going, we'll welcome him. How was your long weekend, Ken?
Oh, it was great. A couple of the people at Shell, Jess and Diana. You may have seen them on the Skin Divers role on our public Discord. They're visiting Hawaii here at Shell Holly, and a couple of us and some other friends went out and had a barbecue on the beach on Sunday. We figured the crowds were going to be just totally wild on Monday because here in Hawaii, people go pretty hard on Memorial Day weekend. It's maybe the most popular like holiday outside of Christmas and New Year's here. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun. We grilled some Terry burgers and did some body surfing. All around perfect day.
Yeah, so I guess context, guys, Memorial Day happens around the end of May here in the States, and generally people barbecue, drink, hang out in the backyard. Uh, there are
It's kind of the
sales.
first like unofficial day of summer. Like
Yeah,
technically
it's kind of
summer
like,
is a
yeah, it's
month
like the
later,
start
but
of
like
summer.
it's sort of the start of the summer season. And then Labor Day, which is I think one of the first Mondays of September, is like the unofficial end of summer.
Vraz, how was your weekend?
Yeah, I had a pretty quiet weekend, nothing like Kenny's. Yeah, I just went out with friends to enjoy a concert at a cafe, and besides that was just reading around and yeah, uh, working out and stuff. Yeah.
Like a concert inside the cafe sort of thing?
Yeah, yeah, they were playing like Ed Sheeran songs,
Cool.
so that was fun.
Oh, nice. Like acoustic guitar?
Yep.
Cool. Well, this is not what you guys came to hear, but it's nice to. I think there's something to be said for like lubricating the wheels of discourse. Kenny, you're muted if you're saying anything profound. You're still muted, my friend. Uh,
I'm sorry, I'm still learning this interface. Cairo, what was your 3 day weekend like?
oh, it was good. I didn't do anything crazy, but hung out with the family. Hey, look at that!
What do you
Oh
know,
my
Andrew?
goodness.
Hey, folks.
Sure. Can you hear us?
What's up?
How we doing?
Hey.
Good. We are
Oh,
live with whoever is tuned in at the moment. Um, is it Andrew or Andy?
Andy,
Andy.
thanks for being flexible with me.
Yeah, dude. You look great. So whatever was going wrong seems to have resolved itself.
Good deal.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'm Cairo. This is Kenny, and Viraz, who's one of our developers. And we were honestly just catching up about Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
I don't know if we did anything of note, but that's sort of where we were at. So perfect timing.
Good.
Cool.
Well, I've met Kenny before. Viraz, I think you were on probably the first call that we had too. But Cairo, nice to meet you for the first time.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for being on here. And I know we're very quickly going to get out of my marketing depth if we get into the thorny security. So I'm very glad to have these two guys here to back me up. Um, but uh, but yeah, I think we have a mini agenda here that I'll bring up. Eliza was very helpful in putting this together. So shout out Eliza on the Shell team.
Shout out Eliza.
Yeah, amid all her international travels, uh, being able to help with this as well. How is everything going with you, man?
Good. Um, ca- Calling in from Bulgaria today. Um, been here for almost a month. Lisa and I might have sort of similar lifestyles right now. I'm bouncing around every month, so
Conferences mostly?
no, here and there, but my wife and I have been doing this for over 3 years now. So
Oh, just
it's
sort of like a nomad thing. That honestly, I'm very jealous.
yeah, and it wasn't supposed to last for this long, but it's turned into that. So quite the adventure.
Any countries or places that particularly stand out to you from those 3 years?
Oh man. So we did the U.S. We were living in San Francisco when we, you know, prior to this, and we stayed in the U.S. for the first 2 years. We've only been in Europe for probably stayed in the U.S. for the first like two and a half. We've been in Europe for about 4 or 5 months. Um, so
Okay, so a
uh,
lot of domestic.
yeah, but we kept going back to San Diego. We kept going back to Austin. Um, I'm from Kansas City, so we would stop in KC every once in a while. Um, and then I think overseas, London and Dublin have been the highlight. But we're headed to Budapest on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to that. I've never been. I've heard good things, so we've got
Exciting. Yeah,
5 or 6 weeks
I
or
had a
something
good
there.
time in Budapest as a youth. I think I looked up a lot of the places where I stayed, and a lot of them shuttered during the pandemic, unfortunately. So I don't know how much it's changed, but it's a fun place.
All right, I'm looking
Um,
forward to it.
but yeah, we're here to talk security, threat detection, I think
We could talk
specifically.
other things too. I wasn't sure sort of what the expectation was, so I threw out some things that were kind of self-serving, but I'm happy to go wherever you want to go.
No, we're all about self-serving. What do you think, Kenny?
Maybe a good place to start is you can give the listeners a little bit of a background about yourself and how you ended up working at Forta and you know why you're so passionate about what you do. I know the last time we talked, you were very good ambassador for the protocol, and I feel like a good place to start maybe if you could sort of share the love with our audience.
Sure. So my professional journey and my crypto journey are sort of one and the same. I am a lawyer by trade, and I graduated law school in 2012. And within a year, I met um, some of the entrepreneurs that were in the Los Angeles area at the time that were um, starting crypto related companies. I guess back then it was more Bitcoin related companies because that was really the what everybody was trading And the business models back then were really simple. It was, exchanges, um, wallets. You had a couple payment processor companies that would, take your crypto and then convert it and then pay the merchant with fiat. Um, and that was kind of a novelty that, some companies supported. And then there were Bitcoin ATMs back then, and there were some people and companies that were doing mining, but that was about it. There were not very many business models or companies. But because a lot of those projects did touch crypto or were taking it on behalf of users and custodying it or passing it, to a third party, they had regulatory obligations. And so I started doing state and federal regulatory work for some early crypto exchanges, and then all the basic kind of corporate work that startups need, raising money, issuing stock to employees, stuff like that. And I did that for about 3.5 years. Worked with some companies like some early altcoin exchanges like Poloniex, some early altcoins, Dartcoin, which is now Dash, after the rebrand, and uh, and then transitioned into consulting, which is kind of an odd move. Most people would typically go sort of to a larger law firm or just jump into a startup. I I went into a large consulting firm. So I joined Ernst and Young in 2016 and moved to San Francisco, and that coincided with kind of the birth of EY's crypto team. Um, it was something that I think a lot of their clients were interested in asking questions about back then. So I joined, and for 5 years worked with primarily exchanges, large exchanges, and custodians and fintechs and banks, helping them in a variety of capacities, not doing any legal work. Um, and then in 2021, left and joined uh, initially Open Zeppelin. They had incubated the Forta concept, and then we spun it out shortly after in the summer of 2021, and um, and then launched the Forta network later that year, uh, fall of 2021. So the network's been live for about a year and a half. And so Ford is now a standalone project, but still a great relationship with the team from OZ, and they have a hand in core development and a stake in the network. So
So
that brings us to, I guess, current day.
yeah. So what's the 2 minute pitch for Forta?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I'll do even better. I'll do the 10-second pitch. So Forta is like a giant security camera and alarm system that sits above L1s and L2s, watches on-chain transactions, and it's looking for suspicious activity, exploits, phishing attacks, other threats. And when it sees those patterns in transaction activity, it flags them and emits a public alert about it. And we are now distributing that threat intelligence to a variety of different um, sort of consumers. So wallets want it so they can warn their users about, um, scam addresses and contracts. Exchanges want it so that they can track scammers and hopefully, prevent them from laundering money through their platforms. Other security companies want it for all the same reasons. And DeFi protocols, want that information so that they can, protect their protocol against threats.
Cool.
That was longer than 10 seconds, but it wasn't 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I think what's the law that anything is going to take longer than you think, even taking into account the law?
That's the story of shell protocol deadlines.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, it's, you're analyzing the chain. Is there like a machine learning component to this analysis?
There is. We do try and leverage ML where it fits. I'll give you one example. Um, one of the things that we do to detect exploits as early as possible, smart contract exploits, is we will essentially fuzz every new smart contract deployed on Ethereum. And we will also analyze the sort of the different aspects of a smart contract, opcodes in particular. And we've trained a model using a data set that probably has somewhere between 300 and 400 like known malicious smart contracts in there. We don't have a huge data set because they're, Web3 doesn't have a super long history.
Yeah.
So it's, I think in relative terms, it's a pretty small data set, but for this space, it's large enough. So that model can, trained on 300 or 400 malicious smart contracts, can now look at new smart contracts that are deployed, look at the opcodes, and determine with fairly high precision what's malicious and what is not. And if we label something as malicious, we'll pay even closer attention to it because the next transaction from that contract might be the exploit transaction. So we'll take a much deeper look at it and try and figure out everything we can about it, and then we'll start throwing parameters at it and try and simulate that contract and you know and see what happens. The goal would be to try and predict the exploit and see that the intended effect is that a bunch of money is going to move from this protocol to an attacker address. And so if we can see that in advance, we can notify people.
I'm gonna be greedy here and ask one more question just because I'm curious, then I'll hand it over to the other guys on the team. But obviously, when you have an exploit and you're looking at, tens, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of tokens moving into an attacker's hands, like blocks matter, seconds matter, and you've got this alert system. If you have, I don't know if client is the right word, but you have someone who's taking advantage of your alerts, and they have the ability to say freeze, a token or in some way shut the stuff down. Are these systems built so based on a Forta tip, um, action can be taken like without a human in the loop, like faster than a person could go log in and shut things down? Or is it all subject pretty much to manual review?
It's a great question. So a couple thoughts on kind of the current state. So what Ford is doing is the detection aspect of threat monitoring. The other piece of the puzzle is the prevention part, which is what you do with the alert, what you do with the intelligence that you get in real time. So today, most DeFi protocols have a very manual threat response process. It involves usually a multi-sig
Yeah.
that can then pause either the entire protocol or a particular pool or an asset, depending on how kind of surgical it allows. And I think on average, if you look at like the last 4 or 5 years of exploits, the average response time for a DeFi project is like 24 hours to actually pause a system.
I guess that's what happens when you have people all over the world who need to wake up and sign a transaction, right?
Exactly. And so I think the ironic part about that is that like that process obviously was not set up for like real-time threat response. It was set up for decentralized governance,
Yeah.
and to appease, or to, probably, well, yeah, it was set up that way to, I think, avoid regulatory scrutiny. It
Well,
was not it was not set up to be quick.
in certain cases, it's also about gaining the trust of the DeFi user and limiting what the team can do as far as seeing the team themselves as a potential risk factor. I know there's certain things that for Shell take 48 hours, just the way they're set up to be able to change parameters or things like that. I don't know, Kenny, if pausing is theoretically instantaneous.
Yeah, so I think pausing can be done very fast. But like, because I mean, so you can still take money out. Like the pausing just makes it so you can't do anything but take money out for our pools.
Right.
These are just for the Proteus pools. We can't pause the ocean. The ocean is basically like the Terminator. Just it's set, it's running. Hopefully, it has good intentions. I mean, we're pretty confident that it does.
Do we need to
quite a
do
bit of our
ocean
own treasury
alignment
in there,
research here?
but we don't really have any. No one has direct control over the ocean, but the Proteus pools we do. Part of this is just that the Proteus pools are a bit more complex than the ocean. So we want to have that extra layer of safety, and part of it also is that we want to be able to like retroactively make updates to the Proteus pools, and so. But the thing is that if you can update the parameters in an automated market maker, it's basically tantamount to giving someone like the ability to like rug LPs. And so what we did is we put like this time delay where you have to wait 40. You have to first of all you have to like you basically have to wait 48 hours before you can make any updates to the Proteus pools. You can say like, hey, we're gonna make an update, and then wait 48 hours, and that basically is to make it so that even if the team went rogue, or more likely our hardware wallets got compromised, there still is like very you still have like a pretty wide window, and yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but having to freeze it like within an hour is like really hard, right? Because that's just assuming it's hard assuming you're like online and paying attention. It's like, but realistically, a lot of these hackers, they know what your sleep patterns are. It's not that hard. Just look at Discord, figure out what time zone someone is. That's also not that hard. I mean, if you're like motivated, it's not hard. And so you got to assume that this is going to happen in the middle of the night. That's what I always assume. More than once I've woken up like like a cold sweat, and like fuck. I'm like, okay, nothing happened.
Kenny, I think you're slowly being eaten by like a white noise signal. I don't know, one of you is. I'm gonna toggle my mic. Andrew, I think that you were explaining the status quo and there was gonna be a segue into, but here's how it should work. Is that right?
That was a good tee up. Well, yeah, I was gonna just sort of point out kind of the challenges with the way things are currently done. So one of them is that the way teams have sort of set up their response process, it's naturally very slow. The second is that if you wanted to do something in a more automated way, like an automated circuit breaker or something like that, right? You would need to be somewhat tolerant to a false positive, which is, depending on the use case, it can be sort of higher or lower. So, Kenny, I think you were talking about like being able to withdraw funds. In certain, like if you're a hedge fund, for example, and you have capital deployed into a pool, withdrawing that capital out, if that's all you do, that's a pretty low risk sort of activity. So you're more tolerant to false positives, right? You can withdraw on a false positive and you're not going to lose much money, right? You're going to lose the transaction fee.
Yeah.
If you're trading on a false positive and you dump a large position quickly, you're much less tolerant to false positives because the damage of doing that
Yeah.
is financially much greater.
It could
And
be, say,
so
one half of an ARB or something like that, a very time sensitive transaction.
exactly, yeah. So I think what you do, what that automated circuit breaker does, if it's just pausing something for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour, okay, but you need to figure out sort of what's the collateral damage of that action, assuming it's a false positive, right? And are your users, you know, forgiving enough? Um, I think the better scenario is kind of what happens in the real world today, which is like you don't shut the bank down when there's a breach, right? You block the high risk transaction, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to degrade the user experience for all the legitimate users. So that's what we need to be able to do, right? You need to be able to block things that are anomalous, clearly exploitative, or just kind of violate the intended purpose of the protocol. And there's a couple services out there that are uh, doing things like that, where I'll give you an example. They will they'll look at a protocol for 30 days, and they will map basically what the expected behavior of that protocol is. So like take an AMM, for example, right? So after a month, they'll know, okay, what's normal activity and what's abnormal activity. And then they can kind of profile what is, you know, expected.
Right.
And they will, after that 30-day period, they can set rules where if something falls outside of that expected behavior, it just gets blocked. Now that it could be a legitimate transaction, but just really high dollar amount or
Yeah.
anomalous, or it could be malicious. But it's a, I think it's probably a fair trade-off, frankly, in most cases to block or at a minimum, or at least slow down activity like that. So it's probably only gonna impact less than 1% of your transactions, right?
This sounds a lot like what, as you said, banks do as far as flagging things that seem risky, that, an AI has determined might be going to Cuba, or why is this guy suddenly, in a different state, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and then I assume if it gets blocked and the person protests, like, I need to take my money out, there's some sort of manual review that would occur at the protocol level. Now, I think one of the reasons a lot of people are attracted to DeFi is because of this, like, very sort of like code is law, like I can do anything that the inputs of the protocol will allow me to do. Do you think we're sort of like, as some people say, reinventing TradFi when we take steps in this direction?
Um, I think we I think we are and we will continue to reinvent TradFi with an internet native technology stack. Um, but and this might be my perspective is obviously influenced by my 3.5 years as an attorney, but I think that to really scale those types of protections or guardrails are actually useful. And I think that it's a choice that a protocol can make, right? They're not mandatory, but I think it's important that you have a wide variety. You have a spectrum of tools at your disposal if you're a
Yeah.
core dev team, and you could choose which ones you want to use and which ones you don't want to use. And I think this is a useful tool that some teams will choose to leverage. Other teams that have a different approach or ideology may not choose to use it, and that's totally fine. So I think you know the the majority of people that will have ultimately use DeFi are doing normal sort of everyday things with it, right? They're transferring
Yeah.
money, they're lending, they're trading, and that's all within sort of that kind of typical profile of your average user, right? There's less than 1% of people that are doing things on the edges, and things that would stress test a protocol or that are outright malicious. And it's up to a protocol to determine whether they want to support stuff like that. So I think there's room for sort of everybody and all approaches.
Cool.
It seems that, ultimately, I think you're right. People are going to vote with their dollars. And if people are willing to put up with that centralization side of things, or are willing to have, if the benefits outweigh the costs, then people will go for it. I guess what I'm curious about is just from a architecture or design perspective, is there a way to, because right now it feels like this would be fairly straightforward to implement it as a centralized capacity, but is there a way to decentralize this so that we're not just letting one single point group determine what goes through and what doesn't go through? If there's a way to kind of stick to the DeFi principles, because in a way you're only as decentralized as your most centralized component of the protocol.
I'm confident that there is. If you ask me to explain the specifics of it, I won't be able to. But just kind of trying to brainstorm on it right now. Like, for example, take that use case of the project that is profiling they're profiling sort of what expected activity looks like for a particular DeFi protocol, and then using that as like a kind of a safety net.
Now, is this Forta that does this, or is this another hypothetical security protocol?
It's not a hypothetical, but it's not Forta. There's another project that's actually doing this. Yep. It's just an example of kind of like what's around the corner.
Yeah.
So I think the way that it would work today is, Kenny, the sort of the centralized version of this, right? Where you have a third-party security team that sort of, tunes the system, runs it, looks at the model, and then sort of, creates the rules based on that. And then that code gets, maybe integrated into some contracts. And then, it's now those sort of guardrails are now part of the system. I think if you open sourced those models and allowed a community or a core dev team to sort of do that tuning on their own, right? Or you allowed, a core dev team plus the support of like an auditor or something like that to participate in that activity. Then it becomes more of a, it's more of a crowdsourced effort. So that's kind of one step in the kind of decentralized direction. I think the key is just not having like a single person or company that has the ability to sort of block a transaction, right? I think that's what we're trying to prevent. That's a lot of liability and responsibility for that team too. So I don't know anybody that would want that job, frankly.
Yeah, not me.
Yeah.
So we got a question from our Discord from Yannick.
Hey,
Security
Yannick,
question.
good to see you.
Why does no one formally verify smart contracts anymore? I remember formal verification being a huge hype topic, but I don't see many people talking about it. Well, I'm not an expert. I'll definitely want to defer to Viraz and Andy. My 2 cents is, from what I've heard, is that it's actually like really, really hard to do a good job. And like it was sort of like the cost versus benefits just didn't pencil out in practice as well as it did in principle. I don't know. Andy and Viraz, what do you guys think? Why aren't we formally verifying smart contracts like people maybe a couple years ago thought we would?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think it is like you said, it is. I think cost is a factor as well, and also I think the technical capability as well. Because what I've seen, I think gaining that technical capability takes time, and nowadays protocols run in terms of their timelines are so fast. In terms of planning everything and trying to release everything, and and also like going through audits and stuff, and after all the testing and the testing process, the auditing process, and all of that. So they usually, I mean, there are services like Satora and all that, but they are, like I said, pretty costly. And also, if you want to do it on your own, then you need to be technically capable, which is possible, of course, but it takes time. And then you need to balance out the trade-offs, and that's where protocols decide to go probably not choose that, avoid doing it. So yeah, that's been, I think that's what I have heard and I've like seen in the space in terms of the current scenarios.
I guess in a way, Kenny, it's sort of ties into what you said about people voting with their dollars. If verification mattered a lot to people, they would put pressure on projects to do it, right? But if people can get away with not doing it, I don't know. Andy, do you have anything to add or
I agree with what Kenny and Viraz said. I think a lot of it, certainly in a bear market, probably comes down to cost. Um, and I think any investment in security, you kind of have to look at like what incremental gains do you get, right? And so if going through an audit makes you 75% more secure, does formal verification get you to 90, 95, 99, right? If it is that substantial, then maybe it's worth a couple hundred grand. But if it only takes you from 75 to 80 or from 85 to 90, right? Then that's just a risk, it's a sort of cost benefit analysis that every team has to make.
It's
I
like,
also
go
oh,
ahead,
go
please.
on, Viraz. No, no, go
No,
for it,
I was
dude.
just saying, I think for me, I would say, I think after you go through the development cycle in terms of internal reviews, testing, like integration tests, unit tests, and then, like invariant tests, right? And then you go for an audit, and then you have these, static analysis tools, right? Slither, and then you set up Forta bots, for example, for, on-chain monitoring. I feel that all of them combined are a pretty good, checklist, and then I think formal verification is pretty much a good to have thing. That's what I've like experienced. And even if you sort of don't have that, but you have all the other things checked out, then that is a pretty good, you know, security checklist that you've got in terms of releasing a product out there.
Yeah, I think in general, like the only way to be 100% secure is to not ship a smart contract system. You know, um, you're never gonna get that 100%. And in my experience, my personal experience, which isn't like super deep, I'm not a developer, but in my personal experience, like the formal verification, it's only as good as your understanding of the system. And a lot of the exploits that I've seen, a lot of sort of the bugs that we found in our own code, we're not like super deep conceptual like labyrinths of. It's more just like, oh, like we put a minus instead of a plus right here, and it usually like I think it's more about just like making like I remember when I was like a kid taking like math tests, like I would always like get the right answer, but I'd make a stupid mistake, make a negative instead of positive, or something really minor like that, and that like can really cost you in smart contract security. And I think if, if you've really like exhausted every other thing to look at, it feels like to me formal verification is probably worth it. Like if you're really going to ship something, you want to stand the test of time, and you've done everything else with it, and it's maybe like just a polished version of something you've already built, then I think it kind of like maybe makes a lot of sense. But really, it's the stupid mistakes that kill you. And sometimes you just kind of like look at the kind of like a bunch of people looking at the code trying to break it is like kind of is really the only option in my anecdotal experience.
Andy, I guess just circling back to Forta, I have two questions I can't pick. So maybe I'll just throw them both out there and you can focus on whatever you think is more exciting. The first is like, so obviously this is threat detection that you provide to protocols, whoever is going to be wanting to know when somebody may be attacking them on chain. Is this something you've seen groups in the space, protocols, try to do in-house? And like, how has it gone? And what are the like comparisons of that versus, obviously working with someone dedicated like Forta? And then the second question was, where do you see Forta expanding into or heading from here? So whatever you want to do with those.
Okay. Well, they're both good questions, Cairo. I'll take them in order. So, have DeFi projects, for example, tried to do threat detection, threat monitoring in-house? Historically, no, because there weren't any tools that made it easy for you to do. Now, I want to distinguish like threat monitoring from like regular like operational health monitoring, which any developer can do, right? You can spin up a bot on AWS and watch some aspect of your system to make sure your collateral ratios are good. Monitor daily active users, stuff like that, right? Every team does those basics.
Yeah.
What most of them do not do is monitor for external malicious activity, right? And that's because most teams don't have full-time security people on staff that are thinking with that hat on, right? They are usually paying a smart contract audit firm to look at their code for 2 or 3 weeks, and that's it. That's sort of the extent of the security support that they get
Yeah.
prior to launch. And if you're a really big protocol like Aave or Compound or Maker, you probably have some retainer with a 1 or 2 audit firms where you're getting sort of regular audits done on upgrades, and they're ad hoc. They can provide ad hoc support and consultancy on different security topics and readiness and things like that. But the vast majority of teams don't have arrangements like that in place because it's expensive. So I think there's across the board there's a lack of security expertise in house. I'm not going to say that that's not intentional though. I think that there's a reason why teams don't invest in like those supporting functions, and it's because the goal is for these to be truly decentralized and sort of run on their own. And if you
Yeah.
build a big bulky team with a bunch of departments and a huge head count, you start to look like any other fintech company out there with a compliance team and an accounting team and a security
Yeah.
team, right? So for all those reasons, it hasn't been a great for all those reasons you haven't seen a big investment in sort of security expertise in house, which is why having tools and third-party security teams that are capable of doing this stuff, it's really important.
Yeah, you almost become like the security department of DeFi, for all these companies that don't have one.
Yeah, I mean that's what auditors
Yeah.
are, right? De facto security teams. Yeah. So And then your second question was about sort of what's on the roadmap for Forta. So Forta's been a free network for the first year and a half. In roughly 2 months, though, we will be turning on fees, which means if you want to consume all the intel that's being generated by the network, you'll need to pay. So the network will be generating and accruing revenue going forward, which is really important for sustainability, number one.
Yeah.
And we're, I think, really excited about continuing to make investments in machine learning and on the data science side to really leverage like the wealth of data that does exist out there. I mean, the beauty of Web3 is, everything is transparent. The challenge is it's not always like structured well, and so that's kind of
The constraint is not the data available. The constraint is the ability to interpret it, right? Which kind of means that it's a perpetual feast for anyone in the business of ingesting and
that's right.
interpreting
Yeah.
chain
So
data. Yeah.
it's very different than Web 2, right? Web 2 is private but very, very structured. Here it's very public but very unstructured. So yeah.
I like it. All right, Andy, I got two questions for you. What was like the moment at Forta where you like were the most proud of the protocol? What was the moment where you were like kind of the most disappointed? If you don't want to talk about the second one, it's okay.
No.
But definitely interested in the first and also interested in the second.
Okay. I was the most proud when this is not a technical achievement, it's a people achievement. But when we hired our current head of research, Christian, we poached him from Microsoft, and he's a brilliant guy, has 2 decades of security experience, sort of in this area that we're working on. And it's amazing like getting someone like that to join your team has such a big boost in morale across the board. I think like everybody kind of feels it. It's like if you're a basketball team, right? And like in free agency, you like acquire the best player in the league. Like when the Warriors got Kevin Durant, right? It was like
Man,
we're gonna win. Like this is
if
it.
this clip makes it back to Christians, is gonna gas him up.
Yeah, I think he knows this. I'm sure I've told him this before. But yeah, it's just I think this is true in sort of all professions, right? But when you get a star player on your team, everyone has a little bit more bounce in their step, and you're a little bit more confident in your vision. So that was when I was one of the things I was most proud of us for. And Kenny, the second part of that question, when was I most disappointed? I think that there were personally, I think there were I'll do a personal one and then I'll do sort of a team one. I think personally there were some people that I would have liked to hire that, at one point or another we were interviewing. And I don't think I fought hard enough for those people. And in retrospect, I'm kind of disappointed I didn't fight harder. If I fought harder and we still didn't, end up giving them an offer or, onboarding them, fine. But I probably could have, I know in my heart I probably could have done a little bit more to fight for those people. So that's one thing I would do. On the technical side of things, I think something that we have now, but that we actually didn't have on day one, was like a dedicated sort of product manager, product lead. We had sort of it was sort of a product team. It was like a product team by committee to some extent. And we've made that approach work. And there are some benefits to it, but I think having one person that sort of owns this thing, particularly for something like product, which is critical, I think would have really benefited us early on. And we now have one, which is great, but we may have lost a little bit because of that absence early on. So I don't know if that's what you were hoping for. All my answers were kind of people, talent related things, but that's where my mind went.
No, that was perfect. Yeah.
I should have asked this at the beginning, but what is your role at Forta? Have you been there since the beginning?
I have. I lead our ecosystem team right now, which is basically like BD and
Yeah,
strategy. Yeah.
cool. Think you'll ever go back to lawyering?
Uh, it was easy for me to leave. I didn't question it. Probably not. Uh, the one thing I didn't like about being a lawyer was I loved working with startups. I loved working with entrepreneurs. The one challenge is that like you only get to touch a piece of the business. You don't get to make product decisions. You don't get to make sort of long-term strategy decisions. So I wanted to be more, quote unquote, like involved and kind of wrap my hands around everything. So consulting let me do that, and obviously being at a startup lets you do that. So tough to give that up.
Well, I think it's pretty clear by now that one of the big reasons we do this show is because we like talking to interesting people in the space and being able to get their time and hear what they have to say. And if other people like to listen in and also get something from it, that's just sort of a symbiosis. So thank you for taking the time. I think that both live and on rebroadcast, this will hopefully spread the word about what you guys are doing. I actually don't know. I assume not really, but is there, to what extent is there a decentralized component to Fort as far as like, is there a DAO? Is there a token? Will there be? Like, what does that look like? There's a Discord.
Yeah, there is a Discord. We do have a token. We have the Fort token. It's primarily a staking token. So if you publish a bot on the network or if you run a node, you need to stake to signal your bot is legitimate and not spam. And if you're running a node, you need to stake on your node, to hold yourself accountable for acting in the best interest of the network as a node runner. We do have a decentralized governance process as well. As I mentioned, like we just sort of flipped the switch on a fees component, and the community had to approve that fee model before it was implemented. So now that they approved it, now we have to go and execute on that. And other decisions like that are made by Fort token holders. And a lot of these, at the beginning I described Forta as a big security camera, but it's actually like it's a compilation of like 1,000 little security cameras, all pointed at different things on chain. And each one of those cameras is developed by a different dev or team. So the even the security camera aspect of Forta is decentralized, right? It's sort of a big shared security camera that everybody can contribute to, and all the data that's emitted, at least right now, is public, and all the bots, I think, are 99% of the bots are open source, so you can you can fork these cameras and tweak them and redeploy them and point them at something else. And so
Cool.
we've tried, yeah.
Well, exciting. And it's fun to do things that you wouldn't be able to do in another space. You know, it sort of reminds you why we're here. Um, any other questions either from you, Andy? Anything you want to add, or Kenny or Viraz, you wanted to throw in while we have him here?
I wanted to ask one thing if
Yeah.
yeah, so I wanted to ask Andy if do you feel are there any like areas where you feel that on-chain threat detection and responsiveness needs, improvements? Like besides, for example, improving the machine learning models to, detect
Mm,
different types of threats.
it's a good question. So it kind of relates, Faraz, your question kind of relates to the question I was going to ask you and Kenny, which was, I don't know if either of you saw or read the piece from Dan Elitzer at Nascent about Oracle-less protocols. And okay, yeah, okay. Um, and I thought it was an interesting piece. I agree with him in many ways. I think you know, early on, the approach to developing a DeFi protocol was, we're going to put this thing out there and we're never going to touch it again, right? It's permanent. And there's actually only a few protocols that are actually like that are not upgradable, right? Like over time, the approach seemed to sort of shift, and now a lot of projects do sort of regularly upgrade aspects of their system, um, which has it creates a lot of risk, um, a lot of work for auditors, but a lot of risk as well. Um, and so I think there is a lot of benefit to having something that is sort of non-upgradable. I think it's beneficial from a security standpoint, beneficial from a regulatory standpoint, just beneficial from a maintenance standpoint. So I'm really interested to see kind of how the approach to kind of building and maintaining protocols evolves over the next couple of years. My hunch is that, like, for a lot of different reasons, regulatory pressure being one of them, like um, you will see less teams sort of intentionally build things that require, you know, consistent maintenance and upgrades. And they will design the protocol in a way where it's sort of very modular, and once it's turned on, it just goes, and you don't need to touch it, and all the other components are external. And the point of Dan's article about this was that you need to move oracles from inside the protocol to outside. And there's other things you can move outside as well. And that creates, not only sort of a cleaner kind of architecture, but for a lot of other reasons too, it's more ideal. So yeah, I guess that's Viraz. That's kind of that's the aspect of this I'm most interested to see, because I think it has a big impact on the security question.
Yep.
What about you? I'm kind of curious what you and Kenny and Cairo. I don't know if you guys read that. It sounds like at least you did. I'm curious what your kind of reaction was.
Yeah, so I did agree with him on some of those points regarding rattles, because I as a dev have has seen a lot of lot of exploits around oracles, and people losing money, and people not auditing stuff and then going to straight away to mainnet, or not testing stuff well, and then just going straight away to mainnet, and then people like other people, retail users, invest in those protocols and they lose money. And I think got the feeling from him. I got why he sort of explained all of that and made sense in some manner. Yeah, for example, like Shell, we don't use any oracles, right? We don't have any on-chain oracles, so we are safe from that risk. But I do get worries coming from, because a lot of protocols still do. I mean, there are like good solutions out there with, like, for example, with Chainlink's price feeds and Uniswap's swap, right? But then they also have separately have their own issues, which you need to be be aware of as a dev. And then yeah, we need to find still. I think we are still in trying to find out that right optimal solution. And but I think we're on the right path. But probably will take some more time in overall as a space. I feel in terms of reaching to that point where we are, we can safely say that oracles are not a threat anymore in terms of on-chain exploits. So yeah, I thought it was interesting, the article.
Yeah, I think in principle I agree, although maybe not maybe not like as black and white. Um, like for our own internal designs for like the AMMs and for smart contracts that we've built so far, it was a point to not use price oracles. Um,
Yeah,
and I
I'm
think that's
pretty
really
proud of
important.
that.
Yeah, and I think it's just like another point of failure that's it's because it's also they're sort of typically, it's hard, it's like hard to reason about um price oracles. And I think like the real but there is a time and a place for price oracles. Like I think Aave uses price oracles, and I don't think they've ever really had any problems that I'm aware of from using a price oracle. um I think ultimately it just comes down to when it comes, at least for price oracles, um you need some form of price discovery. And price discovery meaning like, what is this worth? And if you are an automated market maker like Uniswap or Shell, the whole point of the algorithm, the bonding curve, is basically to create price discovery. And so like you're in you kind of pay a fairly high price for that price discovery in terms of, well, colloquially it's called impermanent loss. I think the more technically accurate term is loss versus rebalancing. But anyway, you pay a price for this price discovery, and yeah, usually in general, prices in markets, price discovery isn't free, and so the alternative to having your own, like running your own market to get the price discovery, is to use a price oracle. So if you are running a like a futures protocol or an options protocol or a lending protocol, where the goal of the protocol isn't to be like trading X and Y per se, so much as you need the price of X and Y as an input for your protocol. It's not clear like what the I'm not aware of any design patterns out in production that can reveal the price of X and Y to that protocol without tapping into some kind of like third party to tell it to, either a Chainlink Oracle or like a time weighted average price from an AMM. Um, and so I think it's a valid field of research. It's something that we're looking into. I think eventually we want to build options and derivatives, or plug that into the Shell protocol. And it'd be nice if we could do it in a way that didn't. And that's kind of one of the design constraints, is that we don't use a price oracle. Hopefully, I think there are ways to do it, but it's not, it hasn't been proven out in production yet. In terms of upgradable smart contracts, I feel like one of the reasons why that was not a thing in the early days is just because DAOs were a lot less robust back then than they are now, and so there wasn't really a great option of like, how do you upgrade this contract in a decentralized way. But now we have that option, and people are experimenting with it. I think certain parts of a contract it's okay to upgrade, but like the core protocol itself, yeah, making it upgradable, in my opinion, is usually not the right design choice. I mean, that's something, so like the ocean, or the foundation of Shell, that's not upgradable. The only thing that can be changed is like, the fee parameter, which can be turned on or off. But the core protocol itself can't be changed. I think it's a lot better, if your protocol requires like an allow list, maybe you should design in a way that doesn't require an allow list. If your protocol requires like updating modules periodically, then maybe you should rethink the architecture. I think in general, what you want, it's better to have like your core protocol be static and just like it doesn't, once it's built, it doesn't change and no one can really control it. And then when you want to update your core protocol, you just ship a new smart contract and migrate over. To me, that seems like a much more resilient and robust approach than trying to like delete smart contracts and plug in new smart contracts. I mean, you've seen so many like exploits, even like in so many like even like blue chip DeFi protocols that have been around for a long time and really know their stuff when it comes to security, making these types of mistakes. And so I guess I like the short answer is I think I 90% agree, but not 100%. I think there's I don't it's not a one size fits all thing, but personally that's my approach when designing shell for sure.
Okay. Interesting.
Cool. Well, feel satisfied. Feel like if I ever find myself in the position of running a large attack surface DeFi protocol, which, I think is just a reflection of the amount of money more than anything else that it's handling. I'm glad things like Forta are out there to help make sure that not everybody gets their money stolen, because that's kind of like I don't know. There's not a whole lot of worse things than that as a DeFi founder than having all of everybody's money get taken.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. But no, I appreciate you coming on. I don't know what time it is over there. I assume it is late.
It's 11:11. Yeah.
Okay. And even later for Viraz. So thank you both for
Yeah, Viraz, thanks for staying up. I figured I was the latest, but you've
No
got me
worries.
beat. So yeah, I can't complain.
yeah. And well, we'd love to have you on again down the line to talk about how things are evolving. But really appreciate you taking time, Andy.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me,
Yeah, stay in touch. Let
Viraz.
us know how Budapest is. Mm.
Yes, Viraz, Kenny, good to see you guys again. And Cairo, but my takeaway from this call is that you are probably a little bit more technical than you lead on, sir. So thanks for the good questions.
It's all just proximity
It's all
to
an
me.
act.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It makes you approachable and a good moderator, but you
Oh,
definitely know more than you lead on.
well, thank you. I'm not gonna argue, but again, I think I owe most of it to just spending time with these guys and hearing what they have to say. Um, okay, awesome. Well, we're just gonna wrap up a little bit of shell business. On the technical side, Andy, once you uh disconnect, if you would just leave your window open for a little bit to make sure that your uh recording finishes uploading to our server. That way
Okay,
we can put up a nice HD version afterward. And
will do.
yeah, we'll see you around, man. Thanks a
Okay,
lot.
thanks, guys.
Yeah, Andy, thank you
Bye.
so much, man.
You bet.
And then there were 3 shell amigos.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we pretty much have the call to ourselves. Which may be on me for not announcing uh the stream last week again, but this will be recorded for future generations. So on that note, I think we should get into a little bit of shell chit chat before we wrap up.
Definitely.
Season 1 crabs are coming like today.
Yep.
So
That's the lead.
yeah,
Crabs today.
they did finish. They finished sometime over the weekend. Which if you were here for our discussion of Memorial Day weekend earlier, you can put together that maybe the devs were away from their computers Sunday, Monday, but we do have everybody's points. A big reason that took so long is because the compounding points are pretty tricky to calculate. and doing that for everybody. Well, we just have so many users that it took a little while, but it will be faster from here on out. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, one thing that we've made some changes to season 2 based on our experience in season 1. Namely, we removed compounding points. We really like them from like a incentivization mechanic standpoint. But in practice, they made calculating shell points a real pain. Very complicated, very time consuming. Because basically, long story short, we would have to start from anytime we want to calculate your compounding points, we'd have to start from like 0 and then recompute everything.
Yeah.
So that meant we couldn't like batch people, we couldn't like calculate your points and then save it at a certain timestamp and then like start out from there. The next time we recalculate it, we actually have to go from 0. And the longer you're an LP, the longer it would take. And so, as much as we liked compounding points, we just felt like the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So, pretty soon you're going to see the latency when you open the shell point screen. One of my pet peeves of the app is every time I open my shell point screen, I gotta wait like I don't know 30 seconds or more just to wait for the points
Yeah,
to
with
load.
that little cowrie loading.
I mean, I love it. Shout out Joe who I don't know if he
Yeah,
designed it
that
or
was
if he
actually made by one of our first users who
yeah
also coined the term government toucan. So maybe he's like the shell whisperer.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway, um, as much as I like watching that thing go, it sort of takes away for me some of the excitement of shell points, knowing that there's going to be like a 30-second latency or more from when I open the tab to when I can see it. So now that we're going to be batching the shell points, it'll be much faster to recalculate them, and overall have a much better and streamlined user experience for season 2.
Oh, another thing that people have been asking about, when are we going to have these votes regarding Stargate and Reuni tokens, which were the two winners from the pool party event. As soon as we have crabs for season 1, because I think the solution is that we're going to do it as a crab vote, because having toucan voting on chain has just proven to be a real bear to try and implement as well. So toucans will definitely continue to play a role in deciding things. But as far as just getting this sort of ratification out the door on these two tokens, I think having the crabs decide is the best way to go. And to be clear, it's not one or the other. It's going to be two separate votes, one for Reuni, one for Stargate. And if one or both of them gets above 50% approval, it will be added. So I would expect, based on what I know about our community, most likely both will be approved. Especially because there's not like a very externally obvious opportunity cost to supporting new tokens. But obviously, it's up to you guys. What else is new? Oh, you're muted, and that looked very intriguing. So,
Working on Shell DAO.
Sheldao. Okay.
Yeah, working on the Shell token airdrop. It's good that we're getting to practice with crabs and collab. That way, everything is going to be super dialed in for the actual Shell airdrop. Yeah, I think right now we're just probably the intermediate deliverable will be a blog post about more details about how the airdrop's going to work, specifically how vesting and lockups for
Tokenomics Part 3.
yeah.
I think we've also promised to get into our investors a little bit in that.
Yeah, we may just put that in part 4 just so we don't like have too many like unrelated things in one blog post.
Okay.
We'll see. I mean, yeah. There's also it's just doing a lot of bookkeeping work, which
It's your favorite, I know.
I know, yeah,
Um,
but no, I think we'll get to the token investing. I think honestly, I think that's more important for the average person is understanding like how lockups investing are going to work. Um, and yeah, I think the reason why we haven't written the blog post yet is we haven't finalized the design. Part of why we haven't finalized it is because we're still scoping out the smart contracts and making sort of sussing out like making doubly sure that we actually like have a clear path to building what we want to build. Looks like we're almost done with that. Um, yeah, Viraz, correct me if I'm misspeaking. Uh,
Yeah, I think we're in the middle of testing everything right now in terms of
the
vesting.
smart contracts for the DAO.
Yeah.
and
Excuse me.
yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty cool vesting and lockup mechanic. Um, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it'll, the goal is to give people flexibility to like profit take and sell their shell tokens if they want to, but also give people the incentives to hold on to their tokens and especially reward people that believe in the long-term prospects of the protocol. Um, and
It's I don't want to get into it too much before it's ready, but I guess you could draw some comparisons to staking, but not really staking, right? Like in staking, there's sort of like the default condition is to have tokens be liquid, and then the action is to lock them up for a return, right? And there's some parallel to be made here.
well, yeah, there's gonna be some staking for sure. There's gonna be for some staking for sure. I mean, spoiler alert, we're building out like a V token governance model, but there's a couple of twists along the way.
Well, if you
Um,
know Shell, you know we're gonna put our own spin on things. I think everything we've shipped, we've put our own spin on. So
yeah, we just have a pathological inability to copy paste.
it's true. That is true. Um, Gosh, there's got to be more. Um, so a lot we're designing as far as UI. Um, we said last year our sort of recurring thing was like you can do so much on the ocean. The constraint is really like front end. Um, and so we're trying to make good on that and build out front end capabilities that sort of reveal the power of the ocean. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the intermediate features that we're gonna ship is more robust and flexible NFT swaps. So let people go NFT to NFT, for example, do multi-token swaps with NFTs. I think that's like currently in the pipeline. That should be kind of fun. Uh, we're also working on interfaces for token launches. So when we have some part of the collab airdrop that we've kept aside, and we're gonna kind of test out the token launching smart contracts and UI UX side as well. And if that goes well and everything kind of works, we'll probably launch a couple of small tokens just sort of related to Shell Protocol, something similar to Broquan's Booty. And there's two reasons for it. One is I feel like there's gives us more opportunities to have more fun with the whole crafting and
I like
Broquan
fun.
and sort of shell point game.
Someone
It
grabbed,
also, would
yeah.
be a good way. I mean, the most important thing is that it lets us further test out and prove out the technology. Because if we're able to successfully launch NFTs and tokens with it, then we can start branching out and building out tools for their teams to do it. Use the software, and on top of it, it's not a bad way to get a little operating capital as well. And lastly, this will be a practice for another round of practice for when the shell token is launched, because the idea is to
Yeah.
take advantage of the tech stack that we've used.
Sorry, guys. Give me just a second. Apologies. Hang on. Just hang on. Sorry. You were saying, Kenny?
Oh yeah, so one of the big features that we're working on is token launch, both on the smart contract side of things and also on the UI UX side of things. Our first round of practice, we have some of the collab airdrop set aside to test this out. Fairly low stakes. The second round of testing we'll probably release some more Broquan's booty type items for shell points. And this will be a lot of fun. We'll get to add some new wrinkles to the game, and also if things go well, maybe we'll be able to raise a little bit of operating capital. And the idea is, first of all, like we want to make this like a launch pad for other teams, other tokens, other projects to use, and we want to dog food it ourselves and really make sure that everything is dialed in. And also, once the shell token is ready for the token generation event, it'll be really cool that we can use our own platform that we've built to facilitate that. And so the more rounds of practice we have, the better. And yeah, that's something big coming up. We want to make it easier for people in general to deploy their own token pools without needing the core team to get involved. And also just make it more fun and engaging to explore everything that's happening on Shell Protocol, especially as we add more tokens, more pools, more primitives. It'd be really important to be able to look around and see what's happening.
Yeah, I find myself, I'm addicted to earning shell points. It's true. And when I log in and I want to find information about a pool, I rest easy knowing that soon much more will be there, hopefully, if everything goes well. I also want to say about the booty collection, I think one of our quartermasters brought up a very cogent point about these NFTs being quite expensive, I'd say, for like the median user, and probably not very practical. Of course, I say practical to activate. I think there's honestly a lot of arb to be done in crafting and combining and selling, um, which I will leave as an exercise for the listener to figure out what that is. But the reason that this collection is getting smaller and smaller is because the way it is coded, we cannot add additional items from nothing. In fact, the crafting, at very best, it can be 1-to-1. So essentially, the number of total items in the booty is just going down because people are burning them. And there were many, 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 many to begin with, and they were very cheap. And now that is not the case. And as fun as deflationary mechanics are, we also want to have things that are practical for people to use so they can actually enjoy the features without needing to have like hundreds of thousands of dollars in shell. And so the solution I believe that we're going to do is, from a contract perspective, deploy a new collection of items which is less constrained as far as how we can add and modify things. And within Shell, this will pretty seamlessly merge with the booty items. You'll be able to craft between them, et cetera, et cetera. On OpenSea and other marketplaces like that, it will be a separate page. But that does not mean that we're discontinuing the booty. It'll just be booty plus whatever it is that this new collection entails. I think that's a pretty good overview. Anything you wanted to throw in, Viraz, before we call it?
Yeah, we are also like awaiting audit for time evolving Proteus, so that should be out soon as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. That's very exciting. The devs are exercising good due diligence and getting time evolving Proteus audited before we put all of your money into it. And by we, I mean you, because you control where your funds go on show. Okay. Well, I think that's a good a time as any to call it. A pleasure speaking with you all. Happy Tuesday that feels like Monday. And oh, audience, dear listener, we have a very exciting June lineup of guests, which we will be posting shortly. Aloha, guys.
Bye, everyone. Take it easy.